All right, so in this section, we're going to be talking about circles, and you can see here that this is going to be the last section of this, and then after that, there will be some reviews that you can do online on Canvas, so make sure you check for those, and then remember that next week, beginning of next week, you'll be taking exam 3 in the testing center. So you can take it either the 14th, 15th, or 16th. So make sure you get signed up for those if you haven't yet. All right, so circles are kind of a fun thing to talk about here. So let's first of all look at what a circle is. All right, so a circle is a set of points on a plane that are an equal distance from the center. So if I'm thinking, okay, here's the center, right? All of these points that make up the outside of a circle are always going to be the same distance away. So like from here to that outside edge, right, anywhere. That's not a great circle, but all of them should, the radius is from the center to the outside edge, and that radius is always the same anywhere in that same circle. So you also need to know the standard form of this equation, and this is something that you need to have memorized for the exam. It's not going to be given to you. So the standard form of a circle looks like this. X minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared equals r squared. Right, where h and k is the center, so center is at h comma k, and the radius is the r that we have in there. Not r squared, but just the r is our radius. Okay. We're going to also talk about one other form of a circle that you also need to make sure that you know, and it's the general form of the circle, which looks like this. Starts off as ax squared plus by squared plus cx plus dy, and then plus e equals 0. All right, so we'll be dealing with equations in both of these forms, equations of circles, but we like this standard form a lot more because we can easily pick out these two things, the center and the radius, where when it's in this general form, we can't just see what that is. We're going to have to change that general form to standard form in order to find our center and our radius. Okay, so we'll do that in just a little bit. All right, but let's think about how we would write the equation of a circle if we know the radius is 4, so we know r equals 4, and our center is -1, 7. So remember, that's our h and our k that we're looking at. All right, and maybe I'll just write down here next to this, all right, the form again is x minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared equals r squared. All right, so if we put those in, right, the things that we know here, we know our r, we know our h, we know our k, so let's go ahead and plug those things in and see what we come up with here. So I've got my x minus h, which is a -1, so I'm going to write it as x minus a -1, right, all squared, plus y minus, our k is 7, all squared, and then equals 4 squared. So I'm just putting those numbers in place of my R, H, and K, and then I just have a little bit of simplifying I need to do here. So this minus and negative 1 is really adding 1, so I'll have x plus 1 all squared, and then plus y minus 7 all squared, and then we need to simplify this. 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. So this is how we'd want to have our answer on it. Okay, now I want you to notice something here, right? Our center is at -1, 7. And so remember before when I talked about this thing, said insiders are liars, right? And that just meant if it was, inside some grouping symbols like we have here, right, then it's not +1 that's going to be part of our center. We're doing the opposite of that, right? We got this -1. And then it's not a -7 for that, for my y coordinate of it. It's the opposite of that, all right? Insiders are liars is how we want to make sure that you remember you're kind of doing the opposite there. Okay, so now this one we're going the other direction. It's giving us the equation, and now we're pulling out the information that we need on here. All right, so in this one, I want to find my center. So my center, I'm looking here, all right, for my H and my K. So remember, insiders are liars, so I'm going to have +3, comma, and then this one's telling me -3. And then my radius isn't 9. Remember that we said that's R squared. So in order to figure out what the radius is, we need to take the square root of 9, which is 3. Right? And now we can graph that circle. All right, so to graph this, all right, we know our center, we know our radius, so let's go ahead and make our grid here. And so we first need to start by plotting where the center is. So let's go ahead and draw little markings here on our grid. So 3, -3. So right 3 down 3 would be about here. So that's where my center is. And then my radius is also 3. So it's telling me I need to go 3 places in each direction. Because remember how we said the radius is always going to be the same amount in any direction. So I'm just going to go up, right, and put a point. Maybe I'll do it in a different color here. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3. If I go to the left, 1, 2, 3 is there. I go down, 1, 2, 3, and then to the right. And then I can just try and put this together. Sometimes my circles don't look so circly on here, but hopefully you get the idea. That almost looks like a football, but all right, but that's kind of the idea of what you're going to be doing on that when you're graphing it. Okay. All right. Let's start off here. Let's see. I want to change this question here that we're going to be doing. All right, so I'm going to change this first equation because I want to make it something that's going to be a little bit easier to deal with. So we're going to start off with a question. It says this, so it's going to give us x² + plus y squared minus 10x minus 8y minus 32 equals 0. And we want to find the center and the radius. Right? But again, remember when it's given in this general form, we can't just pick that out. So we want to change this to standard form. And we can actually do that by completing the square that we've talked about. So notice how I'm going to set this up. Okay, so I'm going to get my x's together. So my x squared minus 10x. I'm going to put those next to each other. And then I'm going to put plus blank. I'm going to make that a green blank right there. All right, now I'm going to list my y's. So I'm going to have my plus y squared, and then minus 8y, and then plus blank in that orange. Okay. And then I still have that minus 32, but I'm actually going to want to add that 32 over to the other side. So I'm going to have equals positive 32, and then I added the green blank to one side of the equation. So to balance that out, I've got to add green blank to the right side, and same thing with the orange blank. If I add something to the left side, I've got to add that same something to the right side. And so now I just need to figure out what goes into those blanks. Right? And we do this by completing the square. So looking at just these first three terms here, right, that's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to take half of the middle term. Now make sure those are in descending order, meaning I've got my x squared, then my x to the first power, and what I'm trying to find is that constant term. All right, so let's take half of the middle term, so negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5, but then I need to square all of that negative 5, which is 25. So 25 is what goes in the blank here, and also in the blank on that side. All right, now let's figure out what goes into our orange blank. Well, let's take negative 8, we'll find half of it, which is negative 4, and then we've got to square that whole thing. Negative 4 all squared is positive 16. So 16 is what goes in both of those blanks. All right, let's see, and I'm going to put little orange brackets around this too, just to help us keep straight what we have going on here. So now just look at the stuff in the green brackets. Right? I want to factor that. Now I just made this into a perfect square trinomial so that it will factor easily. Right? Now if I looked at doing the factoring, we're thinking, okay, x times x is my x squared. What times what is 25 that adds to be negative 10? Well, that would be negative 5 and negative 5. All right, but we don't want to keep our answer like this, x minus 5 times x minus 5. We want it in the form of x minus 5 all squared. Because remember, our standard form looks like that, right? And then we have the y's also. All right, but notice that whatever half of my middle term is, right, that negative 5, that is what I'm going to be putting in here. And that's always the case. Okay, let's look at the orange brackets now. So I've got plus, and then if I go straight to what this factors to be, right, remember it's whatever that half is, so I've got x minus 4, and again, because half of negative 8 is negative 4. Okay, all squared. And now on the other side, we need to add those all up to see what we come up with there. So we've got to do 32. Let's get the numbers right here, right? 32 added to 25 added to 16 is going to give us 73. All right, and now we can write this down because it wants us to find the center and the radius. Now that it's in that form, we can do that. So the center is going to be insiders or liars. So 5 comma positive 4. Right, so positive 5 and positive 4. And then my radius isn't 73. It's the square root of 73. And sometimes it will ask you to give a decimal approximation. Sometimes it will just want you to leave it in radical form. But if it wanted you to give an approximation for it, right, you just put it in your calculator, and then usually they'll tell you how many place values. So if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, this is approximately 8.544, blah, 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 right? But if I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, it would just be 8.5, because that 4 here isn't big enough to round that 5 up, so it just stays at 8.5. So just notice on your instructions if it's asking you. If it wants an exact answer, you'll leave it in radical form. If it wants an approximated answer, it'll tell you where to round to on those. Okay. I'm going to skip that problem for just a minute, and I'm going to come back to it. I do want to show you a couple of things here. So these are actual questions on final exams. And notice 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, like every year, right? All of those years, these showed up. So it's probably pretty good bet that it might show up on the final again. Okay? So let's look at this first one together. Let's look at number 1 together. So on number 1, let's find the center and the radius of the circle. All right? Again, it's in that form, that's general form, and so we need to get it into standard form so we can find the center and the radius. So let's rewrite this. So we've got our x's together. So I've got x squared plus 6x plus blank. And now look at our y's. Something weird kind of happens here with our y's. So we have plus y squared. But I don't have just a y term. See how down here I've got a y term, I've got a y term, I've got a y term. But on the one on the top, there is no y term. So it's kind of like there's a plus 0y in there. So I'm going to write that in just because it might be helpful to think of it this way. And then plus blank. And now remember we need to subtract, or sorry, it's already a negative 40. We need to add that 40 over to the other side. So I end up with equals 40. And then plus our green blank and plus our orange blank. So we can keep that balanced on both sides. All right, now we need to do completing the square so that we can figure out what numbers go in our orange and our green blank. Okay, so to complete the square, we've got this in descending order, so we're looking at that middle term there, that's 6. We want to find half of 6, so 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then square it. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to put 9 here, and also a 9 here. All right, now let's look at what happens here. If I take half of 0, right, 0 divided by 2 is just 0, and then I square it, I still end up with 0, right? And so that, I'm not adding any number to that other side. Oops, I meant to put those in orange. All right, this is 0 here. All right, so now let's go ahead and write this down in standard form. So here I'm going to have x plus 3, because 3 was half of my middle term, all of that squared, plus y, well, let's see on this one, it's going to be, I'll write it like this so you can see what I mean. It's going to be y plus 0 all squared. But we don't write it like that. I'll come back and show you in just a second here. And then I've got 49, right? 40 plus 9 is 49. All right, so this looks kind of weird because we have this plus 0 going on here. Well, really, that's not doing anything for us. So our equation is x plus 3 all squared and then plus y squared equals 49. But if it helps you to just keep this, right there as that plus 0, that's fine with me. Right? I mean, it doesn't really matter to me as long as you understand that that's just going to be a y squared there. All right, so then when I'm looking at my center, trying to find my center, right, insiders are liars, so I've got -3, and then this is just 0, right? So -3, 0 is where my center is. And then my radius, I need to take the square root of 49, which is 7. So again, if I was going to graph this, if it asked me to do some graphing, all right, let's see here. So whoops, that's what I meant to do. So I've got -3, 0 is where my center is. And then I've got to go 7 in each direction, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 down this way. And then 7. Maybe I need to make these a little bit shorter. Oh dear, I shouldn't have quite done that. Let's see. This is going to get really big out there, so let's see, let's put these more closer together. All right, so over -3, right, 0 is there. And 7 in all directions. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, and then I just need to kind of put those together. Like I said, sometimes my circle doesn't look all that circly. All right, luckily on your homework it will, because it will create a circle that looks just so perfect. All right, but something like that, just to make sure you remember that it's 7 that we're going out in each direction on that. All right, and I'll let you try some of those other ones. I encourage you to try number 2, 3, and 4. Those are really similar to the one that we did just up here. Right, so try those out on your own, but I do want to do one more problem with you here. And it's this. So let's think about what this one's asking us to do. Find the standard form of an equation of a circle with endpoints of a diameter at 1, 4 and -3, 2. So remember, a diameter of a circle is from one side of the circle through the center to the other side. So we're given these two endpoints here. All right, that's what these guys are. Okay, but let's go ahead and draw a picture of it. Let's just put it here. All right. So I've got All right, so negative 3, 2, so to the left 3, up 2. It's going to be right there. And then 1, 4, so over 1, up 4 is there. And so that is my diameter of the circle. Okay. So I'm going to have, something kind of going up here and something down here. All right. It's not very pretty looking, but you get kind of the idea of what I'm trying to say here, right, that we're doing on this. So with these, so if we know these endpoints here, right, remember this is 1, 4, and this is negative 3, 2, we talked about some formulas before that could be really helpful for us to figure this out. All right, remember when we talked about the distance formula and the midpoint formula? Using both of those are going to help us figure out the center and the radius, and that's what we need in order to write an equation in standard form. So let's think about, all right, so if I was trying to find the midpoint of those two endpoints, right, do you see how that would be smack dab in the middle of this? And that's what I want. That's going to be my center. All right, so let's go ahead and use the midpoint formula and do this. All right, so remember the midpoint formula says we're going to add our x's together, so x1 plus x2, and divide it by 2, and then add our y's together, y1 plus y2, divided by 2. All right, so it's basically we're finding the average of our x's, average of our y's. That's going to tell us the average where those points are. So let's put in what we know here, right? So I'm going to call this x1, y1, and x2, y2. So with my x1 and my y1, I've got 1, and then plus a negative 3 or minus 3, all divided by 2. And then my y coordinates, I need to put those together, so 4 plus 2, I'm adding those together, and then dividing by 2. All right, let's just keep simplifying this until we get there. So we'll get negative 2 over 2, and 6 over 2, and then that's going to simplify to be negative 1, 3. All right, so that is the center of my circle. So let's plot that on here. So over negative 1 up 3 looks like it's about there. And for my really rough graph, that looks about halfway in between those 2 points. All right, so that's good. Okay, but now we also need to find the radius. We want to know how far it is from the center to the outside edge. Well, I already found, right, that center point, so I know what that point is, at negative 1, 3, and it doesn't matter which endpoint I use with it, right, because those radii, right, the different radius that are found in the circle are always going to be the same. So now let's use the distance formula. And you could also use the Pythagorean theorem if you like that better to find a distance, right? But the distance formula says the square root of x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. And again, these are formulas you need to know for the upcoming exam. Make sure you have these memorized. They will not be given to you. All right, and let's put in what we know here. So I'm going to call, let's see, I already have this called x1, y1. So why didn't I call this x2, y2? So that I'm looking at finding the distance right there between the center and that endpoint. All right, so I've got d equals the square root of x2, which I'm saying is negative 1, minus x1, which is 1, all squared, plus y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is 4, and then all squared. All right, now let's just simplify this. So inside, we're going to do our square root very last. All right, so we got to simplify the stuff inside first. So negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2 all squared. And then 3 minus 4 is negative 1 all squared. All right, but when I square a negative like this, those become positive. So I end up with negative 2 all squared is 4. And then negative 1 all squared is 1. And so my distance, right, on that is going to be the square root of 5. So that means my radius, is what I was finding there, is my radius. So my radius is square root of 5. All right, so I know my center. Here's my h and my k, and here's my radius. So now I can use those things to find the equation of the line. All right, so in standard form, we have x minus my h, which is negative 1, all squared, plus my y minus my k, which is 3, all squared, and then equals my radius squared. So this is my r right now. So my square root of 5, but then I need to square that. So let me write it as like all squared, like this. All right, square root of 5 all squared. All right, and then if I simplify this, this is really going to be x plus 1 all squared plus y minus 3 all squared equals, well, the square root of 5 all squared. All right, remember the square root and the square undo each other, and so we're just left with 5. And so that is your answer on it. All right, I hope that was helpful for you in understanding about circles. On the homework, there could be a question kind of similar to this, but maybe they give you the center and an end point and want you to find things. So remember to always think about what do I know? What am I trying to find? Would drawing a picture help me? Right? Think about those kind of things, because usually if I'm trying to imagine a picture in my head, it's just best to draw it out so that you can kind of see what's going on a little better. All right, and again, look for those reviews on Canvas and have a good weekend. On Monday, I will be doing a review for the exam. So my Monday night Zoom meeting will be a review for exam 3. All right.